Watermark's Church Leadership Podcast, a conversation with church leaders for church leaders. I'm your host, John McGee. Thanks so much for joining us today. Well, hey friends, welcome back. It is 2025. Happy New Year. And I wanted to start this year with something that I've been thinking a lot about. It's something that I've been reading about, something that I've been observing in other organizations, in other leaders. It's something that I've been reflecting upon as I think back my own kind of leadership journey. And it is this idea of urgency and the incredible value and power of urgency. And I think a lot of times we know what it looks like, and a lot of times we know what it looks like when it's not present. And so recently I just went to the DMV, which is so easy to poke at, and I actually read a transcript of a podcast that someone did recently, and they said this, that the people tend to slow to a glacial pace unless we drive a sense of urgency. And if you need any example, look no further than the DMV. So I found myself in the DMV after hearing that quote and just kind of looked around and watched, the way things were operating, and some great people. The woman that served me, if any chance in the world she was listening to this podcast, she was absolutely delightful. But as I sat there were 3 or 4 people that were working, and there were 3 managers at any one given time standing behind those three or 4 people, and they were just kind of talking. They were telling jokes. They were talking about schedules, nothing of any importance, and everyone just kind of moved along at a glacial pace. Now, granted, they were very, very nice, but that's, I think, when we go to the DMV, we expect that we're going to have this long, slow, inefficient process. And conversely, there's some organizations, there's some churches, there's some leaders we are around, and when we're around them, we expect to have a sense of urgency. We expect to be energized. We expect to have a different set of belief and wonder that we wouldn't have outside of that person or that institution. And so, as I've been thinking about this, it really, all of this is going to be pretty obvious. But I just want to say a lot of this out loud for us, wherever we are in our leadership journey, wherever God has us leading ourselves, our teams, our churches, organizations. It's just this idea that great leaders have a sense of urgency. They have a sense of urgency, and they also give that sense of urgency to those around them, to those that they lead, to those that they do ministry or work with. They have a sense of urgency. That's what all great leaders do. And also, great organizations have a sense of urgency. And so you've been in some of these organizations. There's a quick pace, there's an excitement, and that doesn't happen unless someone is driving that sense of urgency. Because if someone doesn't drive a sense of urgency, what happens is complacency. And it is complacency that when I think about movements that I've seen that have declined, when I think about churches who have declined, when I think about kind of organizations that I've just seen their best days are behind them, part of what's going on there is they've lost their sense of urgency. And so they still show up and they still do stuff. They just don't have that same sense of urgency. And we will always drift. We will always drift towards complacency, as well as all those around us, those that we lead with. They will drift towards complacency unless we bring a sense of urgency. And urgency is just good for everybody. Urgency is good for your organization. It's good for your team, as we just talked about, and it's good for the individuals that you lead with. It helps them bring out the best in themselves. And people want to have a sense of urgency. I don't think people just want to kind of muddle through life and somehow just get through, punch the clock at 5 and go home and watch Netflix. They want to have and do something that matters with their life. They really do. And so it's a gift that you give other people. It's because it's good for them, and then it's good for you. As a leader, friends, when you have a sense of urgency, it's going to bring out the best in you. And it's a harder road to kind of bring this urgency. It is not something that you will naturally wake up and do every single day. But if you do, it will bring out the best for you. And I just see this idea all throughout Scripture, and we may talk about it some more here in a minute. But Paul says in Ephesians 5:16 that he's making the most of every opportunity. And Paul really did have a sense of urgency, and he was used greatly in the New Testament. It's why in so many respects the Christianity spread all throughout the Mediterranean region because of his sense of urgency. When you read his letters, you really do see that. So, what does it look like in action? If you're bought into this idea, you want to have a sense of urgency, what would it look like today after you listen to this podcast? What would it look like for the rest of this day? And then when you woke up in the morning tomorrow to lead yourself, to give to others? I think one of the first ones is just to remember what is at stake. What does it look like? Well, it is to remember what's at stake and convincing yourself that what you do matters. And then secondly, it would be to remind people of the why, or why it matters for them. And again, I don't think people just want to show up. They want to give their lives to something of consequence. And when you believe it yourself that what we're doing matters, and you give that gift to others, it brings out the best in them. And then third, it looks like just kind of having energy and excitement. And I want to say this, it looks like having energy and excitement in your own way. And there are some people that have so much frenetic energy. They're bouncing around, and they're in front of whiteboards and talking really, really fast. And that's the way energy and excitement shows up for them. And then there's other people who just have a very steadied, principled kind of posture when they lead. And everyone knows that what we're doing is incredibly important. It matters, that we will pursue excellence, even though arms aren't waving and we don't use a lot of fast words. And so whatever it is for you, I would say you have to show up with those that you lead and bring this energy and excitement. It looks like number 4, just having deadlines. And rather than saying, leaving a meeting and say, we should do this, or we're going to do this, to say, we are going to have this done by X. Even if you may have to push it back later, there's a sense that it brings out the best in everyone when you have a deadline. Deadlines are absolutely magical. And as a leader, you don't just talk in kind of platitudes and someday down the road. You set deadlines. And then that will then bring people really to the balls of their feet, rather than just kind of, drinking coffee and getting to it when they get to it. And so I think kind of as a corollary to that, number 5, what does it look like? It looks like a bias towards action. Like we do stuff now. We start small fires. We take the next step. That's what this sense of urgency looks like. Okay, and again, it's going to start with a belief that what you're doing actually matters, and it really is. It's a force multiplier. In the military, they talk about force multipliers, and those are things that you can do that actually give you the advantage. So if you had the same number of troops, if you can put one of these things into play, you have an advantage. So an example would be if you were, I think if I remember right, if you're fighting downhill, you don't need as many troops as those that are fighting up. If you are fortified, if you've got some positions, you're dug in, you've got some really good defensives, and you're going to kind of go to war with someone else. If you are dug in, you have the advantage. And urgency really is a force multiplier. And the same person with a sense of urgency will be exponentially more effective than someone without. And the same goes for churches, it goes for organizations, it goes for teams. Those who have a sense of urgency will be exponentially more effective. They will. They always will be. You could have kind of the same plan, but if you have two organizations have the same plan, but if they have a sense of urgency, one will be much more effective. And it's how really implementation gets done. It's how change gets managed. A great plan without a sense of urgency, it's just interesting. It's interesting. A great plan without a sense of urgency is interesting, but a plan with urgency, it gets done. And there is a force multiplier, friends, to having a sense of urgency. When you do, stuff just gets done, and it gets done really, really well. And again, I think back to Paul, and I think about the way he wrote, the way that he lived his life, the way he talked to the churches. In 1 Corinthians 7, Paul said, this appointed time has grown very short, when he's talking to the church in Corinth. Guys, this moment won't be here forever. And I think he ends that passage in 31, and he says, "For this present form of the world, it's passing away." Like this world is passing away. We have to make the most of it. We have to have a sense of urgency. So that's what it looks like. And I think a lot of times there'll be objections. Well, what does that mean? And do I have to be stressed out? No, No, you really don't. So here's what it doesn't mean is that you have to somehow give up on Sabbath practices, or that you have to sacrifice your life, your any type of work-life balance. It's not you working 80 hours a week. It's not asking other people to work 80 hours a week. It's not being stressed out. John Cotter, who wrote a lot about change, he said this, that a higher rate of urgency does not imply ever-present panic, anxiety, or fear. It means a state in which complacency is virtually absent. And so that is what we're talking about. It's a steady sense of movement, of energy, not anxiety on yourself that you would then give other people. An anxious leader helps nobody. It doesn't help themselves, and it sure doesn't help those that you lead. But it's a deep belief that what we're doing matters, and there is a sense of urgency here. And we don't have to be stressed out about it, but we should always feel like we should be in motion. We should be moving. We should be bringing our best, because man, eternity is really long. This side is short. And so whatever we do should matter, and we should bring our absolute best and our energy to it. So in closing, I was reading a book. I was thinking about recently some of the great mission organizations that were started, kind of in the 50s and the 60s. And I was reading a book by Bill Bright. And it was basically, Bill was the founder of Cru. And he was writing a book basically just to invite other people to work for Cru, to kind of give their life, be on mission with them. And, and the book was fine. I mean, it was written fine. I don't think Bill his A gift was writing. He's a catalyzer. But when I read it, you could actually hear this sense of urgency in this man. And he is pleading with other people to join his mission, the mission that God had him on. It was God's mission, but the mission that he was leading up. And he talked about all the things that God was doing. And you could kind of see this, this flywheel effect. His sense of urgency was building a great organization that was seeing some really incredible results, which then was able to attract great, godly, gifted talent that was seeing results, and on and on and on it went. But there was just a sense of pace, of energy, of, as we said, urgency. There was a sense of urgency to this man. And I think he lived his life that way. I think he saw God do some really incredible things. And I will bet, whatever organization you admire, whatever church you admire, whatever ministry you admire, that somewhere back at the very beginning, there was some person with a deep sense of urgency. There was a deep sense of urgency that got that thing off the ground and then set a trajectory for effectiveness, for years of growth, years of being used of God, or seeing the results that they were after. And I'll also bet that you can think about organizations, you can think about people that used to be effective, that used to see results, that used to be cutting edge, and they drifted towards complacency. And so for some of us here, we might not actually lead organizations, and it's the self-leadership challenge that we're going to have, that we can't rely on other people to give that to us. We're going to have to bring that ourselves, which even if you aren't in charge, young leaders, even if you aren't in charge, having a sense of urgency is a gift that you can give those that you lead with and those that you lead under. You have an incredible gift you can give if you just bring a sense of urgency to remind everyone else of what we do deeply, deeply matters. And then whenever it is that you get in charge, you will have a track record and you will have habits and you will have a posture of urgency that then you can give those that you lead over and those who are under you. But until then, you bring that yourself and develop those muscles and that discipline of having a sense of urgency. So friends, if you're listening to this podcast, what I know about you is there's something in your life that you're doing that is of consequence, and you're leading in the church, you're leading an organization, you're leading your family somewhere in your community, you're leading your kids, and what you do matters. And so I'd encourage you this year to move away from complacency and move with a sense of urgency into whatever it is that you're doing, wherever God has you, to not wish for something else that God gave you, but to have a deep stewardship responsibility and sense of urgency for whatever it is that He's placed in front of you. And I think it's going to bring out the best in you. It's going to bring out the best in others. And I think over time, you're going to like both what you do and then over time, who you do it with. So that's my hope for you, friends. I hope you have a fantastic year. I do hope you have a sense of urgency. And we appreciate you listening today. And then as always, if there's ways we can help you, if you have ideas for future episodes or anything else you want us to know or any ways we can help you, you can always reach us at clp@watermark.org. That's clp@watermark.org. We'll talk to you again next time.